Hello and welcome to Hop Along Studio. So in today's video, I want to show you how you can use some of the Wild Whisper Designs products to make a really fun spring scrapbooking layout. So let's get started. So we're going to start by using a 12-inch by 12-inch piece of paper. In this case, this is one of Bray Designs from her Carefree collection that's available from Wild Whisper Designs. The other thing I have done so far is actually come up with some photos that I wanted to use. In this case, I'm just using some photos from my garden. And the other thing that I want to think about with this layout is basically using the rule of thirds. And that's the reason why I have chosen 3 pictures that are all with square dimensions. And really, if you divide this by 3 each way, these are sitting in some of the sweet spots on the page. And this will bring your eye down the page this way. And I'm going to be adding other embellishments and other things onto this page. But the one thing I want to focus on is making sure that we have a focal image in this area. And so to do that, instead of adding a lot of paper layers in behind, because I really like this paper and I don't want to mute it too much, is by adding a little bit of white paint through a stencil just to add a little bit of depth to this piece of paper. So the stencil I'm going to use is actually this chicken wire stencil. This is a joggle stencil I've had for a very long time. And I'm actually just going to throw on my palette a little bit of this Liquitex gesso. If you have white paint works well. I buy my gesso in 1 liter bottles just because I end up priming so many canvases that it's really useful for being able to get the priming on my canvases done quickly. It's also great to use in these scrapbooking layouts as a place for white paint. And then in this case, I am very gently putting it through the stencil. So you can see I'm just muting the color. I'm not looking to completely obliterate what I have going on here. I'm going to go a little bit darker in some spots and a little bit lighter in others. Because again, it's not about completely removing the paper in behind. I just want to make sure that those photos are kind of a center point to this layout. And so you can see just by doing that with just a little bit of paint, it can make a big difference for what's kind of the focus of the layout. And because I'm actually going to have the pictures aren't going to come this far, I actually make sure this is up and down and very subtle going through these edges, just so you can kind of see that there's an end point for this image. I think that's where I really enjoy using paint on things like scrapbooking layouts, because again, it doesn't necessarily take away from what you are trying to show and do, but it does definitely mute it a little bit so your pictures pop a bit more. And even though this paint's still wet, because I don't care too much that it's perfect, this is more about just, again, muting a bit of color in the background. And again, I'm not going always to the edge, I'm just rubbing a little bit here and there. I'm not looking for a consistent coating of white, I'm just adding a little bit of paint where I think it might help just mute the background a little bit. Just gonna do one more little layer here. I'm just gonna try to follow that pattern as much as I can. And yeah, white paint is great to use, but I always have so much gesso laying around that I wouldn't necessarily use it for fine art painting in place of white, but in regarding using scrapbooking layouts and other things, it's a really great option if you're already using gesso for other things. So you can even see I've added a little bit more white in this corner and a little less in here. And so I'm just going to let this dry for a minute or two, and then I'm going to start adding my pictures. So now that your paint is dry, you want to start looking at figuring out where you want your photos. In this case, I've already done a little bit of pre-planning because I love these photos of me in my garden. I realize how few pictures I have of myself in my garden, so one summer I finally actually went out there with my camera and just took some selfies just so I could be seen in my garden that I spend so many hours on every year. So with these pictures, again, I wanted to make sure that they're all square. They basically are in that kind of great spot for the rule of thirds. And again, I want these to pop out a little bit more by adding the white paint. That's actually definitely brought them a little bit more forward, but I'm also going to add a little bit of pen to the edges to give it a little bit of pop out of the layout. And so basically just going around the edges of your pictures like so. I'm using just a Copic marker here just because I know it's going to dry quickly, and it just adds a tiny little bit of ink to the edges but doesn't end up being too messy. And if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll notice I don't do a lot of scrapbooking on my channel, and some of that is I used to do a lot of scrapbooking, and I still love it. I still do a lot on my own, but I really enjoy a lot of the mixed media work. And I think lately I've just been really coming back to scrapbooking. It used to be that I would scrapbook all the time and I didn't really do anything else. And I think the more I've been learning about art and learning to paint and other things, the more I've realized that my scrapbooking as part of my creative self-care definitely has its place. I love doing photography, and I have so many photos, and so many of them are sitting on my computer. And I realize just how therapeutic it is sometimes to grab some paper, grab some embellishments and some stamps, and just create a memory of what I have been through, things I have learned. And like these photos themselves are from a time in my life where I was actually kind of going through a hard time, and so I was feeling pretty down. So I went and grabbed my camera and went out in my garden and took some pictures, and it was so funny how therapeutic the experience was. But I really wanted to capture some of these moments that, even though sometimes they feel bittersweet, they are really good memories about where you've been and where you want to be. So once you finish doing the edges of the photos, the next thing to do is add them onto your page. In this case, I'm trying to think about what order I want these photos. In this case, I used 4" by 4" photos here, and this is a 3.5" by 3.5" photo. I purposely chose that just so that this isn't too far over onto this side of the page, because I do want everything kind of grouped on this side. And again, I'm following the rule of thirds as much as I can. I'm also thinking about where I want my face to be in these photos. So in this case, they're moving out this way. In this case, it's here. And I find that's almost more cohesive for laying things out. I like to think about not just where I'm putting the photos, but even like what direction the person's facing in them. I find by being aware of this, you can actually come up with a stronger design. And now I'm going to start placing the embellishments. I love these little mushrooms. So all these mushrooms are part of the Play in the Dirt Houseplant edition by Wild Whisper Designs. It also has a bunch of these kind of tropical ones and pots and little plants and pots, but they also have these really great flowers and other embellishments that I'm going to be using in this particular layout. And I also actually have the stamp set that goes along with this collection. And basically, if I wanted to have these in a different color, I would probably use these. But since I have all these wonderful images that have already been cut out and colored, I'm just going to use them for this particular layout. When I'm thinking about placing these images, I'm thinking very much about where I want the eye to come. Because in this case, I'm actually expecting the eye to come down the page this way. And so by grouping your embellishments in certain ways, that can definitely give that feel to your page. I'm just going to put the little watering cans. I just love these images. I think they're so strong and they're really fun. And I basically love these little, I love that they have these little ones that have like happiness and happy place, because honestly, gardening is totally my happy place. I spend a lot of time out there. I probably have a few thousand plants. My garden's not very big. It is very full. So gardening definitely is my place of self-care, as much as art is my self-care too. And I also used the Wild Whisper Designs capital letter stamp set to cut out a bunch of letters that I want to add to my layout. In this case, I actually just stamped them out using my Misty, and I have in the card above, you'll notice that I have linked to the video that I actually did show how to cut all of these letters out this way. I also use my brother's scan and cut just to be able to quickly cut out these images and have really consistent borders. In this case, I think I'm going to actually go for these darker letters. I did them both in this kind of leaf green as well as this deep green. And I think I'm going to use the deep green on this particular layout. And I love this particular collection, maybe because I spend so much time gardening. I have so many garden pictures, but I don't always take the time to actually end up in pictures of my garden. I realize that I have years where you don't see one picture of me actually doing anything in my garden. It's basically the pictures of the flowers, which is great, but the problem is I've realized maybe I'm just getting older or what, but it's like I shouldn't have years and years and years where I'm not in photos, especially considering how many that I take. You would think I would end up in a few here and there. So when I chose this particular color, I actually was pulling out this super dark green that I have in the background page. I really like trying to pull out maybe a less dominant color and using it as my title. So this is going to be the general layout of my embellishments, and I'm going to maybe give you little reasons why I chose this layout. Part of it is I like trying to connect the photos with the embellishments, and that's why I have a lot of things layering over top and underneath. I may use some glue dots just to pop a few of these up so they have a little bit more variation. The other thing to think about is in your scrapbooking layouts, you don't want anything to be on its own. Having something on its own in the corner, like if I put this out here, it would not look connected to anything. I love a comment from one of the teachers that I learned from who said, like, basically you should have a little person who should be able to jump from every little part of your layout so that everything's touching in one way or another. It's a way of drawing your eye across so that even though you have lots of things going on, that this is busy by using the muting of the white paint and using a bit of strong design language, you can really bring all of this into one layout where it doesn't look too busy. And actually having these really great borders around all of these images also helps pull them out from the background. So I'm going to start by attaching all these images with glue dots, and I will join you when I'm finished. So I'm almost done getting these embellishments down. So if you don't do scrapbooking, just think of this as another way you can look at arranging elements on an art journaling page, or maybe think about it from the perspective of maybe you want to throw a few photos into your mixed media work, and there's no reason you can't basically create a lot of this type of stuff just on your own. From time to time, I feel just really inspired by paper or something that I see. In this case, it was really a lot of this Wild Whisper Designs products. They are really fun. I love the colors and the design. And sometimes that means I will just choose a day to try something a little bit different, that I will pick up something that I haven't done for a while, like scrapbooking, and it gives you an opportunity to just mix things up. I feel like the more mediums that you try and the different things that you try, just to keep that creative interest and that creative edge to your work, it makes a really big difference. And for those of you who do scrapbook, I hope that you like this project and you've found it useful, and maybe you've learned something new about design for your scrapbooking layouts. And that one I'm just going to just tuck in behind, because again, the more you have these little pieces that are always connected to something else, that really helps bring a sense of a group to your layout. And so you can see in here I have a few little of the white spaces, but again, it doesn't take away from what I'm doing. It just basically brings the focus on the images above. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something new from it. If you have, if you could like it, subscribe to my channel, and maybe provide a comment below about what you liked about this video. Also, I have my website, hopalongstudio.com, where I have other ideas on how you can build a creative self-care habit in your own life. I hope you have a really great week, and I will see you next time.